Welcome to the Big O Show on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe.
Still the same damn kid from Oklahoma, same old dreams hanging off of my shoulders, wishing and waiting on a shooting star for all to see.
And now your host, straight out of Oklahoma, former Buffalo Bill, Jerry Ostrowski.
I'm still the same damn kid from Oklahoma.
Same show, same time, new day. It is the Big O Show here on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. I am the Big O, Jerry Ostrowski, as we talked about last week. We will not be on Thursday nights anymore. We will be on Wednesday nights, and I'm fired up about that, as well as being really, really excited about having my special guest on tonight. One of my favorite teammates I had in Buffalo. You may know him as the former Ohio State cornerback, former Buffalo Bill cornerback. He is my good friend, Marlon Kerner. Marlon, what is going on, man?
Man, Jerry, how are you? Thanks for having me. Just basking in the fact that while we did have 4 in a row, and I won't talk about that team up north, Buckeyes figured it out, went through the playoffs, ran the table, and are national champions. And I don't want to hear no asterisk coming from some of those naysayers.
Well, I will say this, Marlon, because we are going to talk about the quarterback position tonight, something you know very, very well, and something that the Buffalo Bills kind of are a little bit in flux right now with that position, as they need some more players. They have some questions up in the air, and we'll get into that. But and it's good we're talking about Christian Benford tonight and the possible contract extension, because you being a former Buckeye, you know all about what it takes to pay players to have a very good team that wins a national championship.
That is true. They definitely had allegedly one of the most expensive rosters in college football, but it's different. It's just crazy to think about. Like, guys are being paid more money to play college football than they would to go and play professional football. So it's the Wild Wild West out in NIL land right now, and I think it'll eventually shake itself out, because it has to. You can't continue to pay those guys, or else you're going to have with you add that with the open portal, where guys can just transfer. Like you won't have the camaraderie that you get from being with teammates for a long time. You won't have that history and that sense of pride of the fact, like, look, I stayed 4 years at Ohio State. I know what it was like in that rivalry against Michigan, and the love-hate that you have with them and all that stuff. So I think that gets figured out at some point in time, but I'm glad to see guys are getting compensated. We need to kind of come up with a more uniform structure, because right now it's the haves and the haves not. And if you're a big-time program where you have some really hefty boosters with deep pockets, you can kind of go out and pay and build a roster and go get the right player in the portal. The people that are going to miss out, and the guys that miss out the most right now, are high school guys. And so high school guys, really, you have to be the cream of the crop, or you really have to have a conversation with your parents. Like, it's no longer the traditional, let me go somewhere and develop, because they're bringing in guys with experience. And now with the JUCO ruling, you've got to come up with a pathway to kind of figure out if you're not being recruited as a top guy, do I go the JUCO route and go there and develop and get in the weight room and figure out what that looks like? So those are questions that, if you're a college guy, that you have to figure out, especially somebody who might be a late bloomer coming out of high school that maybe only played 1 year, maybe played a little bit their junior year and then played a lot their senior year and wasn't highly recruited. Like, I think of a guy like Khalil Mack, who really wasn't highly touted, got the UB, and we see where his career and the trajectory took him, but he got time to develop. And you won't see too many guys go through like that, because they're going to have to hit the portal a few times and transfer out. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. But man, I'm excited. I'm happy for those guys that they can get paid off their name, image, and likeness. But can you imagine when we were coming up, what that would have looked like? No social media, one. So money's there. Like, wow, that's crazy.
Exactly. We'd have been happy with like $5 and some ramen, man.
Right?
I mean,
like, you give me a couple $100 a month. Like, I'm good. Like, I can get dinner at night when I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm good. I'll take that.
Exactly. Former Buffalo Bills cornerback Marlon Kerner, former Buckeye joins us here on the Big O Show on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. As always, folks, hit the like, hit the subscribe, review the show if you have some time. Tell your friends about it. We're growing, and that's because of you, the listener, the viewer, and we appreciate you. And tonight's topic is cornering the market. I wanted to talk about our cornerback situation, and the first person I thought of was Marlon to bring in to talk about this. And right off the bat, Marlon, I just kind of wanted to get your viewpoint. You know, Christian Benford, 6th-round draft choice out of Villanova. And when you think of Villanova, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. Villanova was always my favorite NCAA basketball team, still is. I'm a big Nova fan. You didn't think about football other than Howie Long. Then they canceled the football program. Then they brought it back. We find this guy, Christian Benford, 6th round, out of Nova, and has turned into a star in the NFL. What is it about Benford that makes him such a good cornerback for the Bills and in the NFL itself?
You know, I think he's got the size and the length that you're looking for. He's athletic, and that's what you want. Like, you want, when you're coming into the league, you don't need the fanfare that goes along with it. You need to go into the right situation. And I remember going down to camp when he first got here a few years ago, and just went down there and was just watching, and everyone was just talking about Benford. This kid Benford, he could be somebody. He might be the find and the steal of the draft. And they found him late. And so when you think about a 6th-round draft pick, you're not expecting much from a guy, but he got in a system. He got the benefit of being able to not necessarily have to play right away. He had a great locker room to be around with Trey White, who was still there. You had Micah, you had Jordan. So you had guys who are going to teach him how to play the game. You still had Leslie Frazier there. So you had a lot of things. He had a lot of things going for him. And then he got to kind of come along, and he picked up the system quickly. And that's the main thing as a young guy. You want to be able to pick up the system, be able to understand it. He had to play a little bit of special teams early, but then when he got his opportunity to get thrown into a game, there wasn't a drop-off, right? I think that was one of the seasons where you had Dane that played a little bit. Trey ended up getting injured and going on IR. So you were kind of rolling guys in and out, and he got to play a lot, and he got that confidence early. And then he was just able to continue to develop and be able to, but he stayed in the system. I think that's the main thing. The system stayed the same for him. He didn't have to worry about learning this or learning that. So he got to figure out what his strengths were early, because the coaches do a really good job of identifying what you're really good at, and then helping you identify the weaknesses that you need to work on. And then from there, just, you got to watch a guy just grow and develop and get that confidence. And then, you know, you could even argue he was probably our best corner last year. You know, even coming back with the injury late in the playoffs, like, that was a guy you were really depending on as a guy to, like, all right, what is this going to look like? And because of his trajectory and where he is, now you're looking at, when do you try to extend him? He's under contract for this season,
right?
And do you extend him now? And I went and looked. I was like, wow, you know, the cornerback market, they're throwing out crazy money right now. And so you're looking at a 4-year extension for him, and it's going to be close to that $90 million. You're looking at like 4 years, 89 and some change. So you're talking about $22, $23 million that you're looking at paying a guy. He's young. He's 24. So you're going to get the value out of him if he can stay healthy. And that's the question you have to ask as a GM, and even as us fans kind of looking like, do you do it now where you're like, all right, I know I can get him for the next 4 years, or do you let him have another really solid season, and then it's going to be like, we can't afford to pay him? And that's the question. And that's always going to be the kind of the hard way to do it, because it's, do I pay for the talent that he's already shown, and knowing that trajectory is going to continue to grow, or do I roll the dice and see if he takes a step back and I can get him for a steal? We know how that's played out in the past.
And you brought that up, and that's something that I think that, you know, people talk about the Philadelphia Eagles all the time, and they talk about how do they stockpile all this defensive talent, especially up front in the defensive line, their front seven. But you brought up a great point, and kind of get your opinion on it. I think the thing that the Eagles do better than anybody else in the league is they will stretch themselves early in a player's career, and maybe overpay now so that they're not paying exponentially more the next season. So if you can get Benford to agree to a $22, $23 million contract now, maybe even 25, you probably save what, $5 to $10 million on the backside of this thing a year, because if he does sit around, he's probably going to make that much more next season. And that's kind of a two-part question. Do you try to get him locked up now? And do you think maybe that's why he's not signed, is that he sees the possibilities of what he can make next year, and he's willing to take a chance and let it ride, and hopefully stay injury free, have a great season, and they get paid next year?
I think that's a possibility. I think most guys, and it was the same when we were coming up, even though the money was not nearly as this amount. It's always you want the ability to say, I know what I'm going to be making for the next 2 or 3 years. You never wanted to go into a contract year with nothing behind it, because there's no guarantee that you're going to stay injury free. And so his camp is saying, hey, we think you're worth this. And so you let the agent kind of have those conversations with the GM and Brandon Beane and that crew. But if I'm a player and I, and we've seen that before, you're telling your agent, look, if we can get to this number, close to this number, I'm okay with giving a little bit back, because he's in a great situation. They've done a good job of building a very young roster, and they've been pretty good about some of those guys giving the hometown discount and not taking as much money that they could probably get in the open market. So I would imagine he's probably in the same mindset, because year 4 in, like, you don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. And
Right.
if you can still make that type of money, if you can get close to that 22 and I take 20 and you take 21, okay. I mean, if I'm him and they say, hey, we'll give you 4 years, 81, are you going to say no to that? I mean, that's
Right.
a conversation that you have. I mean, are you leaving a few months? Are you leaving about 9 or 10 million around on the table? You could be, but there's no guarantee that you stay healthy to go and get that the next year. So I think most guys have seen the opportunity, and you want to play with Josh, and you see what you've been able to do as far as making it to the playoffs and the run you've been able to make. So I think he's probably one of those guys that's probably thinking the same thing. If we can get the right numbers, I'll take an extension. If it's not, then yeah, you're going to kind of roll it out and see what it looks like. And then if he gets to test the waters, now you got to question up, do we put the franchise tag on him and lock him up and see if we can get a long-term deal there? Or if not, eventually he's going to walk.
Knowing that the cap hit is actually greater if you have to go to the franchise tag, so you'd like to get him wrapped up early. Marlon Kerner joins me, former Buffalo Bills cornerback, here on the Big O Show, Wednesday night, 8 Eastern, 7 Central Time on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. And you've used the word a few times now early in our conversation, use the word system. And we know that the Bills like to run a lot of zone. They like to run a lot of too high, although those Beane and McDermott have let it be known. They talked about it in their offseason press conferences that later in the year as it went along, they did play more man than they have earlier in the year. But you say system, and some people feel that McDermott has a system that is cornerback friendly. Do you feel that way? When you look at his system, what he has his cornerbacks doing, do you feel it is a cornerback friendly system?
I'm going to give it in kind of a yes-no question. I think if you can pick up the system, it can be very friendly for you, because they do some really good things to take into account your strengths and how you play well. But there's also a lot of checks and a lot of mental aspect of what they do that you've got to be able to recognize sometimes on the fly. There's a lot of communication back and forth, because they love to show a cover to shell in everything that they do.
Right.
And so because of that, depending on where you play, sometimes they've had their corners, especially in that dime situation when we play those teams that go 4 and 5 wides, sometimes that corner's got to sprint back and be that half safety. And so those are kind of things that as a corner, you're not used to doing. Sometimes they'll run a little game where they combo things out, and sometimes you'll take the low route, the safety take the high route. Sometimes you'll take the high route and the safety a jump and take the short route. And so there's a lot of communication things that go back and forth from that zone process, even sometimes in their man process when they get in certain formations. So I say it can be very cornerback friendly, because if you can pick it up and understand how you're trying to attack the offenses, then yeah, you can do some really good things. You can make some really good plays, and they will mix in man to man. And I say no, because we saw that just because you're very talented and you can play football, Kyrie Elam could not pick it up for whatever reason it is. It just never translated from what he was able to do in college to this next level here in the NFL. So, and I would imagine they would probably say, and everybody you heard is, it's not because he didn't work hard, it's not because he didn't get in the weight room. So the disconnect that I would say then had to be that there was just times that maybe he struggled and it wasn't a natural thing, right? Like when we play, we always talk about you got to be able to understand it, have it in your mind, and it's just I go. I don't think about it, I go. And if you think too much, that's where you hesitate. That's where you kind of pause. That's where you give up big plays. That's where you're a half a step late on a play or making an interception or giving up a first down or even giving up a touchdown. And so that's why I'd say it's a yes, no, just because of the fact that, yeah, it can be a little difficult sometimes to pick up if you're not used to that. If you're always just go play man, I know what man to man is. Hey, you going to play inside or outside?
Right.
Are you on an island? Are they blitzing? What's going on? That's it. Anything else, then if you struggle with that concept and zone concepts and being able to switch back and understanding what the safety's doing, sometimes they'll go and play nickels. You'll see Taryn a lot on the nickel. Sometimes they go out and you got to go here, and they'll kind of match up and do those things. So that maybe changes how you play in the zone scheme or even the man-to-man scheme. So if you can't grasp those concepts, then it makes it a very difficult system and everybody can't thrive in it.
I want you to hold that thought real quick. Jesus with a $2 super chat. We appreciate you, my man. Love my 90s Bills. Love you, boys. Respect. So, Jesus, good looking out. I appreciate you. Thanks for the super chat. I want to expand on that because it's the same thing up front in the offensive line. One of the things that Kaiir Elam was constantly criticized about was what? He was handsy, right? He was handsy. He was grabbing. He was handsy. That correlates to O-line, too. If you had guys that held a lot, that didn't necessarily mean they didn't have the physical ability. It's they were swimming in their own head, and they weren't quick enough with their decisions. And when you're not quick enough, you panic. And when you panic as a player, you do what? You grab, you hold, and those types of things. And it's amazing you went to that talking about being comfortable in the system. I think Kaiir Elam has a great chance to be a very, very good cornerback for the Cowboys. I think
he sure does.
But in their system, and the grabbing and the constant holding led me to believe what you brought up earlier. He just didn't quite grasp what they wanted from him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot because all those checks, right? Like we would come in, and I think back when we were coming in and the K gun, and like, man, like they go and it's at a breakneck pace. And so what a lot of teams try to do, especially with the Bills, is and you see this now, teams will go no huddle just so they can try to make sure that you can't substitute. Like if I got a matchup I like, I'm gonna go quick and I'm gonna get it on there. And once you kind of get into a player's head, then it's kind of like, all right, well, what do I have to do? And if you don't grasp the concept, or if you just don't feel comfortable and you feel like you're a half a step slow, or you're not recognizing the release and the route combination that's coming at you, you do get out of position as a corner. And the first thing that we do is I don't want to give it the big play. So I either have two things to do. I can either let him run by and hope my safety is going to be there, or I'm going to grab him. And most cornerbacks are going to grab first and see if the ref doesn't call it. And maybe I can get by with one. And that's where I thought Kaiir Elam struggled a lot with just really understanding the concept of what they really wanted him to do at times. And then just kind of mentally it didn't flow naturally from him. He had to think a lot about it. He was trying to process it at a breakneck pace, and he couldn't process it and run and backpedal and cover all that and do all that all at the same time. So it just really wasn't natural. And again, no knock against him. It's just sometimes the system is not the right fit for a player. And I think the Bills recognize that. And so they traded him to the Cowboys, got some people say, oh, I got a 6th-round pick from him. Listen, at that point, you just try to get what you can get for a player, and you give them the opportunity to go in and say, go ahead and figure out, get a better situation, and maybe it turns around for you. You can have a great career going forward, and we're going to move on and figure out if we can get somebody else that can replace what we thought you could have become.
Marlon, knowing what the Bills want out of their corners, and a big part of what they want is, in that cover 2 look and the shell, a lot of time you got to play contain in the run. You got to come up and tackle. And you look at the cornerbacks that are still available in the top 100 as far as free agents go in the NFL. You got a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., who a lot felt that he was going to be a target of the Bills, but he's been knocked for his tackling most of his career. Not very, very, he's not great in that. That doesn't mean he's not a good cornerback. I mean, look at Deion Sanders. But you do have to tackle if you're going to be a Bills corner. You look at Stephon Gilmore, 34 years of age. He is physical and smart, but he's getting up there in age. And it leads me to this question. One of the other guys in the top 100 still sitting there is our very own, which is Rasul Douglas. If the Bills choose, if they decide that, hey, we can't get a vet to come in and maybe take over for Douglas, do you wait this out? And, because I would imagine right now what Douglas's camp believes he's worth and what the Bills think he's worth are two wide things.
Right.
If you can't go get that guy, Do you bring Douglas back at a discounted price to have that kind of insurance, and then go ahead and get your corner in the draft? And with what they have draft capital wise, 10 picks already, I think they have 2 number 2s. They got the 1. Do you go ahead and maybe trade up to get a guy, I'm sorry I'm saying this, like Will Johnson from Michigan or somebody of that nature, to fill that cornerback role? Your thoughts on maybe bringing Douglas back as an early stopgap player and then bringing your corner in off of a first-round pick to fill that void?
I love everything that you said. I was literally thinking the same thing. Like, I'm wondering what happened in some of the breakdowns with Douglas, because it would have been a natural fit for him. Again, 2 years in the system, well, about a year and a half in the system. He came in October or so, but he understands that he was the number 1 corner going into it. I have to think that he, looking at these contracts that they're getting out here, he's probably thinking,
Right.
I'm better than some of these guys. I'm definitely worth the same amount. And I think that's to the point we talked about earlier. That's why you don't want to let Benford get to the open market, because he is young enough where somebody might consider going ahead and throwing him. I mean, we're talking about 22 now. It could be 30. It could be 28, 32 next year as an average for corners, because that's just how the market is going right now. And we know the salary cap will continue to go up. So I would definitely go and look at resigning Douglas. I mean, you're looking at maybe 3 years, 35, 36 is what you're looking at.
Right.
And I think time will tell. So you can let that play out. You can kind of let him see what's going on out there. And I think familiarity is always going to be something that he would love to kind of go into a situation. You don't want to be late as a guy that comes in and signs a massive deal, and now you're behind the 8 ball, trying to learn the defense, trying to learn the playbook, trying to get everything in. So if he's going to sign late, Buffalo will probably be a more natural fit, because there's not a huge learning curve for him. He already knows the system. He knows the players here. They would love to have him back. It's just got to be at the right number. And then, yes, Will Johnson. I love Will Johnson. I'm still mad that Will Johnson didn't go to Ohio State. And and one of our former teammates, Damaris Johnson,
Right.
That's his nephew.
Okay, awesome.
So I would always talk to Damaris like, what's Will doing? Will she go to Ohio State? And for whatever reason, when Ohio State decided not to sign Kerry Combs back as their defensive coordinator and defensive back coach, that made Will's decision to go to Michigan easier. I mean, look, Will's big. He's lean. He can run. I think he went 4.39, 4.38 at his pro day. I mean, that's the size you want. That's a guy who can play that zone concept, can get up there and play man. He's big. He's physical. And the question was, does he have the makeup speed? I think 4.39 tells us he has the makeup speed. He can run deep. So that would be a guy that I would see that you might consider packaging if he drops. I mean, I don't know how much you want to try to package to get up there and move for him. But if he gets to like 13 or 14, maybe in that 15, 16 range, somewhere in that, I would say 13 to 17, that's definitely worth the conversation of, hey, what do we have to give up to move up and go get that guy? Because he would definitely solidify your secondary and be somebody that you can plug in on a rookie deal. You wouldn't be having to worry about having to give him $22 million right up front. You can get him for the next 4 years. And if he pans out and looks great, you can pick up that 5th-year option and then figure out how to extend him. But that gives you some time and a young player that can come in and pick it up. And he's already shown that he can play that zone and man scheme.
Former Buckeye, former Bills cornerback Marlon Kerner joins me here on the Big O Show on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, talking a little bit about some college guys. Marlon, if you don't know much about him, just say it. It's no big deal, but I am going to bounce these dudes off you. Obviously, Travis Hunter, out of reach. I mean, we're talking top 3 guy in the draft. We talked about Will Johnson. He is coming off of a season-ending knee injury in September, but it was early enough to where he's rehabbed all the way through, and obviously those numbers he had at his pro day were pretty awesome. You know, you look at a guy like Revel Jr. from East Carolina, some other dudes. One of the guys that I don't know if you've seen much of him, but kind of makes a little bit of sense is Amos, the kid from Mississippi, from Ole Miss. Trey Amos, big physical guy, but he's instinctual and he is a zone corner. Kind of leads me to my question: the guy that you're bringing in, we just had a situation with Kaiir Elam, where we're talking about an elite man-to-man guy. He comes into this system where they have all these checks and zone, doesn't quite pick it up. If you're going to pick a corner, do you want to try to get a guy that's pretty extensive in zone coverage, or do you just most of these guys that are man monsters, can they also flip it and play zone when they need to?
That's a loaded question, but
that's why
hey,
we're not talking O-line tonight. We're talking quarterbacks. That's why I got you on, man.
So for most guys, like if you're just a strictly man guy, you don't play a lot of zone. Could you pick it up? Yes, you can definitely pick it up. It just depends on the complexities of and the responsibilities that they expect of you as a young guy coming in, right? Because there's always that rookie learning curve that you're going to have. The speed of the game is so much faster. And then just the playbook and the amount of changes that the playbook has on a weekly basis. A lot of young guys struggle with that. How to study, how to prepare on a weekly basis to get there mentally and be prepared physically each week. So those are things that you're going to fight as a rookie coming into it. I've seen what you really want is a guy that can do kind of both. He doesn't necessarily have to excel at both of them. You need a guy that has played man-to-man, that can come in and understand the zone concepts, kind of like everybody thought we were going to take Cooper DeJean last year because he understood the zone concepts. He could play man-to-man when you put him out there. You're looking for a guy that when he gets out there, he competes. He doesn't have to win every down and man-to-man, but does he compete? Is he physical at the line of scrimmage? Does he get a good jam or does he whiff? Does he have good closing speed? If he does get beat at the line when you're playing man-to-man, that zone concept then is route recognition, right? So there's a lot of guys that can do the route recognition, but then let's face it, there's going to be a time when you have to play man-to-man in this league, and I can't cover you up by playing zone all the time. So you want a guy that can at least understand both of those concepts. Doesn't necessarily have to excel at one or other at each level, but can I do it? And so you're going to watch a lot of film. So I like Amos just because he was a guy on my list. I was like, if he dropped late, that would be a guy. Noah Williams from Cal is a guy, again, big size that I was looking at as well. You had Cone from Western Michigan would be a project, right? Like that would be somebody that I'd be like, oh, that would be somebody really interesting that maybe you might get in the later rounds. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to move up, Amos is somebody that if he drops late in the first, could you take him late? Yes. He's probably going to be there in the second round as well. And that might be somebody that I would really, really be looking to see if the Bills could get him in the second round.
Let me ask you about another guy that I find very, very intriguing. And I don't know if you've seen much on him, but Jahdae Barron from Texas.
Love him.
A guy that was a top 5 corner, but he's also the number 1 rated nickel corner.
Yeah.
And I kind of ask you this question. It's loaded. Again, I most of mine are that way, so I apologize. But when you see Taron Johnson, a little bit undersized, not getting any younger. He did take some some hits this season, slowed him up a little bit. Can you bring a guy like him in to where, we do have Cam Lewis and some others who can play that nickel spot, but maybe you're upgrading corner and you're upgrading the nickel spot as well. If you bring a guy like Barron in, and I do say this, I mean, and I understand there's always a learning curve with rookies. Is that just too much to ask a kid to be able to a young kid, a rookie, to come in this system and say, we're gonna keep you outside at corner, but we also want you to know and be that second nickel guy? Or do you just want to bring a guy in and leave him somewhere, and then in a couple of years, if you feel they can do both, then maybe you start messing with them?
It could be a lot. I mean, there are some guys that can kind of figure it out, and because the techniques are different. And I think when you talk about playing on the slot, you don't always necessarily get your chance to put your hands on them unless they stack it and flip it and do some things where they invert and have the slot on the line and then the outside corner off. And some teams will do that, right? So I think the technique and the style is different of how you're going to play the slot corner as. And I
want and kind of get into that a little bit more when you were getting there a little bit. And I think you said a little bit, but the differences between playing nickel corner and outside corner, just the fact you don't get your hands on them as much.
Can't get your hands on them. The responsibilities are a little bit different, right? Like if we're playing zone and I'm showing press, when I bail off of it, I'm going to turn. Depending if I'm left or right, I'm turning into it. I'm giving it back. I'm doing a different thing. If you're the nickel corner, you're the underneath guy. Like, so your drop is different. You might line up on a tight end. That's different. Your read and your keys are different because depending on what they come out in, if they go tight end and flex him out, teams love that because now you got a big tight end that's going to run at you and just try to block you and move you out of the way. And they're going to try to run a little zone out there and get quick to the edge. And so those things are coming off. They might crack the tight end down on the defensive end, pull a guard or a tackle and see if he can wash you out. And I thought Taryn did a very good job of recognizing those things. He understood how to attack offensive linemen, big tight end, and try to block him. He knew how to get and hold a spot, but then he could also fall back in and make those tackles. And the Bills love having Taryn Johnson a lot on the field, so they will match him up, even when it's too tight end. Sometimes they'll leave him on there. They'll be like, we're going to go ahead and play it, and Taryn's going to come and make the tackle. So as a rookie coming in, that's a lot to try to kind of figure out how to play in that system, how to play that, how to play strong against that if you haven't done it over the course of your career. So that's why I say you can. So you like to see a lot of guys come in and you start them on the outside so you can kind of get the feel of the game, feel of how it is. And then that's why you have a guy like a Cam Lewis, and you also have a few guys. Ingram can kind of play on that slot if need be as well, because it does take a little bit of time, because that slot guy, the way we played, also is a guy that might be the guy that kind of shows one thing and let the safety drop, and he runs back and plays the other half of the field. Taryn did that a few times this past season, and when he came back from the concussion and got that one big interception in the game. So they do some different things on our slot that will be maybe a little bit more challenging for a young guy maybe to pick up who is just now trying to get acclimated to the system. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but it definitely will be a challenge. You need a guy that really could excel and pick up the mental aspect of the game and all the calls. And you need, I think, if you had a guy like a Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer still there, that could be like, go here, get here. And they really understood all aspects of every position of the secondary, where they're supposed to be, and they can make the right check and get guys where they should be. And I think some of our safeties are still getting to that point. So you might not have the experience you needed to maybe help a young guy be able to come in and excel. So most guys will come in and put that rookie on the outside because it's a little bit more easier. And most guys will already play there, so they're already comfortable playing either at left or right corner.
Final question for Marlon Kerner. If you want to check him out on X or Twitter, he's at Marlon Kerner 46. It's right there on the screen. And Marlon, we appreciate your time and everything with us. We'll have you back on. Your knowledge is vast, and I very, very appreciate you spending the time to be on the show with me tonight. But I'm going to ask you one last question before we get out of here. Marlon goes to the fundraiser, and he goes to the silent auction and he wins the silent auction to where he's the general manager of the Buffalo Bills for the day, right?
Right.
Marlon's he's a general manager of the Bills going into the draft, which, guys, is like a month away or less. What do you do? Your plan, if they said, okay, what would you do to secure this cornerback position on the Bills to get us into the 25 season? What are you doing this offseason to get that position as good as it can be?
I think I'm looking at a couple things, right? I'm looking at, obviously, the draft is going to be the first thing that comes up, right? So I'm still having the conversations with Rasul Douglas and his agent and just kind of saying, look, you've been here. We want to have you back. We want you here with us. And you're going to say, what number will make it? That would be something you want, right? He made about $7 million last year. He's probably looking for that 11 or 12. Can we come up with a deal? Maybe let's do a 1-year, $9 million deal. We'll throw some incentives in there to kind of get you to where you want to be. You have an amazing year, then great. If not, then you're looking at who might get cut later on in the year. So you're always going to continue to work guys out. You're getting into the draft, and the draft is such a crapshoot, right? So you already have all the guys that have ranked. So, we talked about some of the guys that you probably are on the Bills board now. And so what you're looking for is, the draft is so unpredictable, right? Like we go in and everybody has all the predictions of this corner's going to go here and this guy's going to go here. And then there's a run of wide receivers and all the corners are dropping down to like 28, 29, 30. So you might not even have to package your draft picks to kind of get the guy that you have rated as the number one corner. So you're kind of playing those games, or it could be the exact opposite. It could be a run on the corner, and all of a sudden the guys you had up there where you're like, I would feel comfortable moving for him is already gone. So then you kind of have to decide, do I reach, right? And that's what you don't want. You don't want to reach for a guy because there's a run on cornerback. So you really try to make sure that you have guys in every tier. Like, who's my first round guys? If he drops, we're going to take him. Who's my day 2, second, and third round guys? And we're not going to reach. And you kind of just stay true. And I see if there's a run on corners, I think the Bills do what they did last year. You trade out of the first round. You trade out of the first round and try to pick up more picks, because it makes no sense to reach for a guy who might not even come in and make an immediate impact on your roster, because you don't know you're looking at tape like, yeah, the guy can play football, but you don't know if what you saw on tape is going to translate to immediate success now. I mean, we're looking at Benford. He came in and he played, but he didn't play a lot on defense as a rookie. He kind of came in like, this is a guy, we're going to develop him. Jamarcus Ingram is capable. You signed Dane Jackson, and then you kind of just go and look at it, right? Like, who are my guys? If we get through week 1 and we don't like it, who are free agents? You know, we talked about Stephon Gilmore, who might be out there. You know, I'll throw a name out that has been a fan favorite, and we drafted him. You know, Trey White might be sitting there come week 2. He knows your defense. He's already been in that defense. He's raised. He was groomed. He went the Pro Bowl playing in that defense. So there's always guys that are veterans that are going to be there that you can bring in and sign throughout the course of the season. So I would see them really try to stack their defense with some young guys. You try to get some free agent guys that maybe that some undrafted free agents, and you go into training camp trying to figure out what you have. And then you try to add some people late if you can't get the guy that you want. That's the number 1 guy on your board on the defensive side. That's my approach I would take, just because we saw what possible Reach would have done when we look at what Kyrie Elam kind of did. And I'm not saying the Bills reached at all. I thought it was the appropriate pick. But even then, when you take a guy in the first round, it doesn't necessarily translate to success. And it can set you back, because now where you thought you had somebody that's going to be there for the next 8-9 years, you traded him after 4. And now you're back in the same position. So you're trying to make sure you're strategic with it, that you can get a guy like a Benford that comes in and can perform well and is homegrown and developed in your own system, because it makes it a little bit more easier as you get through it, as opposed to having to swap out your cornerbacks every 3 or 4 years.
And maybe if one of those guys you like, you see him slipping in that 13, 14, 15 area, do you use some
I would have
a
trick. Yeah, like if for some reason Will Johnson or Barron or somebody was sitting there at 17, hey, what would it take for us to move him to get this guy? Yeah. And, you know, you have the conversation, because if you think he can come in and immediately help your team, then I say it's worth it. But I don't want to mortgage everything off of a guy because there was a run on cornerbacks. You're like, he wasn't even our top. If that's your top guy, I'm fine with that. But if it's not your top guy or your top 2 guys, then yeah, you kind of have to let the process play out.
We appreciate you listening to the Big O Show on now Wednesday nights on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. As always, hit the like, subscribe, review the show, and tell your friends about us. We appreciate your support as always. I'm the Big O, Jerry Ostrowski. He's Marlon Kerner, former Buffalo Bill. We'll have him back on later in the offseason. He does an awesome job as always. And we'll be here Sunday. And we'll be here next week as well with On the Beat on Tuesday. Then I'll be back on Wednesday night. So for myself and Marlon Kerner, as always, folks, we appreciate you. And Marlon, you have any last words? We go out with a Go Bills. You want to get out with Go Bills?
Go Buckeyes and Go Bills.
Go Buckeyes, go Bills. Much love. Go Bills.
I'm still the same.